First matter this afternoon is Breast Cancer Prevention Fund. Do you have some ID? Yeah, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Please be seated.
Attorney Kat Rennie for the debtor on behalf of Alan Winokur.
Okay, ma'am, would you state your full name, please?
Judy G. Aiken, E-A-K-I-N.
And what's your position with Breast Cancer Prevention Fund?
I was the executive director.
Did you prepare and file the bankruptcy or with the bankruptcy court a list of all of the assets and all of the liabilities?
Yes,
Are
I
those-
provided all that to the attorney.
Okay, and are those documents true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Are there any changes that need to be made?
No.
Before the documents were filed, did you read them and did you sign them?
Yes.
Briefly tell me what Breast Cancer Prevention Fund is and or does or did.
It was a nonprofit that was formed to raise money to provide money to uninsured and underinsured women for breast health. So cancer screenings, mammograms.
And how did you decide who would, or how did the company decide who would benefit from these donations?
Proposals were required to be sent in from potential grantees, and the board of directors would then sort through them and grant funds accordingly to the amount indicated in the proposal, past history of the organization.
Okay, when you say past history of the organization, what do you mean?
Did they have a good history of providing that kind of services in their particular area? We worked with some organizations who did not provide the direct service, but they were, the money went through them to the nonprofits that did provide. And they were required to report on a quarterly basis and provide essentially all information to how every penny of the grant was spent.
Okay, so you made donations or payments then to other business entities, not to individuals. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you have a list of those entities that received payments?
I'm sure that you could go back to the beginning of the organization in 2004. I didn't come in until 2012. But if you required such a list, I'm sure that the records are all there and it could be provided.
Do you have outstanding requests at this time?
I don't think so. There could potentially be one organization that did not get their invoice in prior to my leaving, which was June 28th. And I can't provide the name to you, but again, I'm sure that could be. That information could be found pretty easily.
Okay. How often would the board meet to determine who would receive benefit?
The board prior to my coming, I believe, met quarterly. When I took the position in 2012, I requested more frequent meetings in order to try to understand how everything worked, where they were in the process and that kind of thing. So my first 6 months on the job, we had monthly meetings.
Okay.
And then we went back to quarterly meetings later in that year.
How did Breast Cancer Prevention Fund get their money?
The money was gained through a contract with a professional fundraising organization called Legacy Incorporated.
And could you briefly describe that contract?
The long-term contract, I believe, was for 10 years, was signed prior to my coming. I obviously went through the contract and looked at it, and as to who actually sat down at the table and figured out how that document was going to be constructed, I can't tell you because I wasn't involved with.
Okay, maybe I should simplify that. What did Legacy do? What was Breast Cancer Prevention Fund required to do?
Legacy did all of the fundraising. They hired the individuals who did the calling, and at the end of every month, a person by the name of Jeff Cunningham, who I believe runs that company for Jim Patton, would notify me of the amount of money that came in for that particular month. And so at the first of every month, I was required to give an okay to take that money out of the holding account, which is where it went during the month. So my only responsibility was to give the okay to transfer the money at the end of the month.
Okay, when you say take the money out of the holding account, how did it get in there, and when it came out, where did it go?
All of that was handled by an employee at Legacy.
Okay.
So BCPF basically had two accounts, that holding account and a general checking account from which we operated.
Okay.
So during the month, the young woman who did that job, I believe on a weekly basis, I went up to meet her and spent several days with her trying to figure out how she did her job. Made deposits and that kind of thing on a weekly basis.
Okay, so the account's in the name of Breast Cancer Prevention Fund, but Legacy made the deposits to it.
Correct.
Okay. Who had signing authority on that account?
On the holding account?
Yes.
Just me.
Okay. And who had signing authority on the operating account?
Just me.
What kind of tax returns was Breast Cancer Prevention Fund required to file?
It's called a Form 990, which I think is the typical IRS reporting form.
Okay. And is the reporting current?
I believe that 2012 has not been completed. Clark Newber did file an extension with the IRS, which I believe goes to August 15th.
Okay, and prior to 2012, the returns are current?
That's correct.
Okay, where is the mail delivered for this company?
To the office space that I rented, 1817 Queen Anne Avenue North, Suite 206, Seattle 98109.
Okay. On Schedule B, you list a deposit for security and garage remotes. Is there anything left on that deposit? Is there an amount that can be refunded?
I turned in one of the remotes on my last day, and Alan Winnicor has the other one along with the set of keys. So I'm assuming when that one is turned in, the entire amount should be refunded.
You had a D&O insurance policy. Has that been canceled?
No. I believe in March, I renewed the policy for a year, in March of this year, 2013. They were notified of the consent decree from the Attorney General's office.
What do you mean by that?
I let them know that we had received it. When I read through the policy, that was a requirement, and when there was any sort of major occurrence, they would be notified, so I did that.
Okay, explain the consent decree.
We received a consent decree from the Attorney General's office. I'm not an attorney, so my understanding is that it The Attorney General's office had been investigating, had received a complaint from an individual, and they investigated per his, Mr. Who, I think is his name, his complaint, and basically required that we stop doing business. I believe the date on the document was maybe March 23rd of this year. I'm not certain on that.
Was the consent decree signed by all parties?
No, we never signed. And I have no way of knowing whether or not Legacy Incorporated did.
Okay. Back on the insurance policy, are there any unearned premiums that are due?
No.
You list a claim against Legacy Telemarketing Incorporated et al. What is that claim for?
Is there an amount associated with it?
No, it says unknown. It says unliquidated claim against company and principals for fraud and other possible causes of action.
Well, that must have to do with the consent decree from the Attorney General's office. Because they were instructed through the decree to cease fundraising on our behalf. And yet I think it went on for several more months. I know the attorney is holding 2 different batches of donor checks that came in during that period.